Hi, I'm Ken Adams, and welcome to this edition of the Valley View. And this week I'm joined by Brian Hines of Hindsight blog. And Brian, you had a very interesting blog about 6 things to improve the City of Salem. So that's why I wanted you to come down here and talk about some of the things that the City of Salem could do to make things more attractive and more livable here in Salem.
Right.
And the first thing was the bridge, if I'm not mistaken, about the third bridge.
Yeah.
And there was a guest opinion last week in the Statesman Journal talking about various aspects of the third bridge, and they were very positive, you know, that it's going to happen and like that. So why don't you talk a little bit about the third bridge and maybe what we should be doing?
Okay. Well, first, to give credit where credit is due, these goals came from Salem Community Vision. I'm a member of the steering committee, and we were talking about how the City Council is going to be setting goals for the 2015-17 session, kind of after some new councilors have been elected. So they're finishing up that process in a few weeks. So we wanted to send off kind of the citizen goals. Came up with these at a meeting, and they asked me to write them up, so I wrote them up, and we had a letter to the editor published, and I put them on my blog. So you're absolutely right. Not building the third bridge is one of the goals that's been on the Salem Community Vision project page for a long time, and we think that's a really dumb idea, even though today the Statesman Journal kind of backhandedly editorialized in favor of it. I mean, it's a bad idea for a lot of reasons. One, it's $500 million, $1 billion roughly, once financing costs are in. It just sucked out of Salem's taxpayers' pocketbooks or tolls or an increase in the gas tax, whatever, for something that isn't needed because traffic counts are steady. People are driving less. Younger people are wanting to live closer into town. I'm reading a book called, I finished a book called The End of the Suburbs. That's, even though the suburbs are not dead, they're definitely, downtowns are becoming the place both to work and to live. And in Portland, that's clearly evident. In Salem, it's becoming more evident. So to have sprawl-inducing bridge, thinking that all the growth is going to take place in the far reaches of West Salem, is just absolutely wrong, because that's a backwards way of looking at the world. Not to mention the carbon, inducing, emissions producing, result of having the third bridge and encouraging more auto-centric development. And it's not going to reduce congestion in Salem, which is minimal to begin with.
And we only have it at peak hours, basically, anyway.
It's only there for an hour or two a day, As I often say, and I don't know why this argument doesn't make more sense to you, because it makes sense to me, probably because I'm me, but I go down to visit my daughter in Southern California a lot, a very vibrant economic place. That's where she and her husband live, because they sell high-end stuff. That's where a lot of money is. You get out on the freeway almost any time of day, and you just go, oh my God, how can people live here? Or going to Portland, which is one of the fastest growing and most desirable places, and the freeways suck compared to Salem. That somehow people are able to function because they talk to people, they do business in their car, they use the phone, they get by with much worse congestion, and they aren't saying, oh, let's build more freeways, because they want to keep their place livable, Portland particularly, because that's what draws people there, is the quality of life. So Salem is just kind of, the city council is just shooting itself in the foot if it thinks that building the third bridge, which is just going to make the riverfront uglier and will not do anything to improve the quality of life here except speed people through from I-5 to 22 to the coast faster and get through Salem quicker while we're paying for the bridge, it makes no sense.
Well, and one of the things, I talked to Paul Evans recently, the state representative, and he was saying that he wants to see, before any further discussions about a third bridge, let's make sure that we've retrofitted the 2 bridges we have, so that, because right now we're overdue for a major earthquake, and those bridges more than likely wouldn't survive a major earthquake. So let's get that fixed, let's make that a priority, much more so than a third bridge.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, they can be retrofitted for a tenth the cost, I don't know, into the tens of millions, 60 million I've heard, somewhere in there, rather than, 400 or 500 million and much more with financing costs. You could add a lane, perhaps, if you needed to. You could set them up so the lanes could be reversed if there is an accident on one. I mean, there's plenty of capacity I remember I went to a hearing on this, asked a bridge engineer from CH2M Hill, and said, you know, there's got to be enough lanes. There's 8 lanes, I believe, on those 2 bridges. That's more than there is on I-5. So it's not the bridges that are the problem, right? It's the bridgeheads, it's the approaches, and what happens when you get on or off the bridges. And he goes, that's right. And I said, so then why don't we just fix those? And that's when he stopped talking to me, because I was making too much sense for him.
Well, yeah, and in the early morning hours, I've noticed that, say around 8 o'clock, there is a tie-up eastbound on 22 in West Salem, and also southbound on 221. And so maybe if it was easy to get onto the bridge from those locations, it would be helpful,
Right.
as opposed to making another bridge, which is up about 3/4 of a mile or a mile further north.
Right.
I mean, so
then people have to make a big detour around
Right.
and to get to Wallace Road. So how many people would do that? You might rather wait, you know, 5 or 10 minutes. And
exactly.
well, all these things are linked together. So, I mean, one of the other goals was, you know, in having better biking and pedestrian options. I mean, a multi-use pass and so on, so that you could get from West Salem. You can now through the pedestrian bridge, but once you get into downtown, you're pretty, you know,
You're pretty
screwed,
constricted.
basically. Yeah.
Well, one of the things too is that, like, I get nervous at certain points downtown when I'm biking. That it seems like I can't keep my head on a big enough swivel to keep track of all the cars that I'm looking at.
Exactly.
And quite often I'm going over near that bridge to go to a radio station, and it's okay up until I get downtown. And then it's like, it's really tricky to get over there, you know, through the downtown with the one-way streets and several lanes and lots of cars going in different directions and like
Right.
that.
Right.
And so your next goal then is to improve the streetscape so it's easier for pedestrians and bicyclists and skateboarders to get around downtown.
Right.
And as you were saying earlier, a lot of younger people are doing things here in Salem, and they're taking these alternative transportation modes because cars are expensive. And they're very, a friend of mine, she sold her car and saved the money she would have spent on the car and got to spend a year in Paris as a result, just because she wasn't operating a car. And that also kind of meets up with public transportation. We don't have a good public transportation system for people that work downtown. It's very difficult to get around with the limited service. We don't have any service on the weekends,
Right.
and we basically don't have much service much past 7 o'clock in the evening. So
Right.
anybody that works at kind of a different shift or an off shift has trouble getting, say, to work or home from work after their shift.
Right. Yeah, all these things are linked together. I mean, there's a great group that sprung up, Salem Bike Boulevard Advocates, that's trying to press the city council and city officials, you know, for more multi-use lanes, or at least, you know, designated bike paths, even if they're not physically separated from the road. At least there's something more than just a bike symbol on the middle of a busy lane as it is on Liberty. I mean, that's only good for those highly fit people, of which you may be one, and we are probably too old to be that person in Lycra that can pedal at, you know, 25 or 30 miles an hour and keep up with traffic. So
I used to be able to, not anymore.
Right, right. So that's why we said that all these things are linked together. That if you're not spending $1 billion on the third bridge, you could perhaps spend much less than that, you know, 10%, 5% of that on bike paths, on mass transit, on having decent, you know, ways of getting from West Salem to downtown. I mean, I was just reading that they were planning to put the Chariots system, something on the May ballot that would institute either a payroll tax in Salem for bus service, which is now not allowed, I think, by state law, or, well, in the Chamber of Commerce, through some letter that wasn't revealed, you know, put the kibosh on it, because even though polling showed that the people of Salem are favorable toward paying a little bit more, either through businesses or perhaps even through a property tax for better bus service in the evenings and weekends. So, you know, all of these means are a lot cheaper and a lot more environmental friendly, and like you said, allow people that either choose not to have a car or can't afford to have a car to be able to get around Salem. because right now it's a very, you know, auto-centric city. I've ordered a folding bike partly because I live out in the country, and I don't like to carry around a bike in my car, and I just want to be able to stick it in my Mini Cooper and park like where you do, like down here at the CCTV offices, and then just ride around downtown and see what it's like. And if I don't kill myself first, I'm going to learn a lot. But just in the comments on a blog post I wrote about this, people are already giving me tips, because I said, I can't ride down Commercial. And they go, well, you don't ride down Commercial. You go down High Street, then you go down the path in Bush Park, and then you cut through the alleys in downtown. I go, well, yeah, thanks. I wouldn't know this. And if you're a tourist, you're not going to know this. So just imagine you're a tourist, you come to town with your family, you want to go for a bike ride, and then you're just scared because downtown it is, you know, it's like a mini freeway with 3 lanes going each way.
Right.
I recently went to McMinnville with my wife because we hadn't been there for a long time, and I'd heard so much about the McMinnville downtown. And I came away both underimpressed and overimpressed. And what impressed me about McMinnville is just the fact that it's 2 lanes, 1 lane going each way in their downtown section. And when you walk across the street, you just feel very comfortable crossing the street. You just zip across and go see the store there. And when I compared that with Salem, which is the goal of the streetscaping goal that Salem Community Vision came up with, and which people such as Carol Smith were working on years ago, would be to take out a lane of traffic, have 2 lanes on the main streets in Salem, say on Cord and State, so they would make it much more bike and pedestrian friendly, and it more economically, you know, vibrant, because people are much more willing to go to a downtown and walk around and shop when they don't feel like they're subservient to these, you know, big, you know, cars whizzing by. Parents don't feel comfortable with their kids running across the street, whereas in McMinnville I did. You know, dogs are out, children are out, and because it's only 2 lanes.
It's less intimidating.
Very, very much so.
Right. And there's a lot of places too where you can have, like, say, 2 right-hand lanes making a turn. So like as a pedestrian, you don't only have to watch the immediate car, you might have to watch out for the car to the left of them. You know, so it is kind of tricky sometimes with some of these intersections. And I've seen a number of times where people enter a lot of driving in a big hurry and aren't really paying very close attention to pedestrians.
Right.
And so that is a big concern, you know,
Well,
if you're a pedestrian.
Right. Yeah, I guess the overall question, you know, in these goals that fits them together, you know, we talked about revising the tree ordinance so downtown trees aren't cut down needlessly, streetscaping, making the downtown more beautiful, taking out a lane, adding in water features and trees, the Sustainability Commission, reprioritizing where the transportation money goes rather than big bridges into bike lanes. It's partly, I mean, the theme, and I think the City Council is just missing the boat on this, and our current mayor and city manager, is that, I mean, to make a place attractive, and this is, I linked to a YouTube video, or it was actually a TEDx talk by an urban planner that said, now people can go, you know, anywhere. A business can really relocate anywhere, can relocate out of the country, can really relocate, particularly in the knowledge and creative industries, anywhere it wants to go. And people can go where they want to go. And so to attract people and businesses, a place has to be a real unique place. And when something looks like it could be anywhere in the country, like Lancaster Drive or South Commercial Street, people go, why should I come to Salem? I can get strip malls anywhere. I can get you know, 3 lanes of traffic whizzing by anywhere. I can get a big bridge anywhere. But a cool downtown, you know, with the brick buildings, with the you know, the alleyways, there's just so much potential, not only in downtown but in Salem. And if we would save our historic buildings, save our trees, we're in Oregon, for gosh sake. You know, we shouldn't be making this clear-cutting the trees like they've done at Salem Hospital and on the grounds of the old blind school, just because we can do it. There should be an environmental ethic here, a green ethic that which is what attracts people to Salem. And instead, we're just trying to make this look like, you know, I don't know, Oklahoma or Texas or something.
Well, or Sacramento, where I came from before I moved here. I mean, you were talking about Lancaster, and in Sacramento, I talk about Folsom Boulevard. It's the same kind of situation. And that was my first impression, too, of Lancaster, was like, I could see this anywhere.
Right.
And like, as a result, I almost never go over to Lancaster because I don't want to.
No,
I just,
me neither.
to me, it's very discouraging to walk over there, and it's not a pleasant drive because I mean you got so many cars and people, you know, trying to, you know, pull into parking lots, pull out of parking lots, you know, and there's no real good, from my point of view, there is not good transportation, public transportation here in Salem.
No, not at all.
And so it's not like I'm going to get on a bus and go down there either.
Right.
So I've always oriented myself toward the downtown. And that's one of the reasons why I actually moved to Salem about 7 years ago, was because it had a downtown, a definable
real
downtown.
Right.
And that was the thing that attracted me. And I know over the course of my life that I used to have to commute long distances. And about 30 years ago, I said, no more. I'm going to live someplace where I can walk to work within an hour. And if I can't walk there in an hour, then, you know, I'll just apply at jobs where I can. And it made a huge difference because now I don't have to worry about having a great car. The car breaks down, I'm walking.
Right.
And so it's a mental attitude too, that you aren't dependent on that car. Yeah, they're handy if you need them, but the thing is, there's lots of other ways of getting around. And the City of Salem still has that feel of a downtown. I know that.
Oh, it does.
And I know my son came out for a visit shortly after I moved here, and he was talking about it reminded him of a small little New England town with an actual downtown and like that.
Right.
So
no, you're absolutely right. There's so much potential in downtown if it wasn't, you know, for the streets. I mean, until you go to someplace like McMinnville, McMinnville really only has one street, I mean 3rd Street, I think. So Salem does have the advantage of an actual, you know, many blocks that you can walk up and down. But the disadvantage, you know, which I saw after going to McMinnville, is just the difference between standing on a street corner in downtown Salem and standing in McMinnville is just, you know, one, here you feel overwhelmed by the cars zipping by, and there you feel the emphasis is on, you know, people, the shops, the place. And as this guy in the TEDx talk says, you know, people, they get obsessed about parking like our city council is here. How are we going to pay for the parking garages? And should we have parking meters? And what should be, it should be 2 hours or 3 hours? And he says, you know, that's just a backwards way of thinking, because you can have all the parking in the world, and if nobody wants to go to this place, they're not going to use that parking. The first thing should be to make the place, you know, so attractive, desirable. You know, that's right. I mean, like I always say, you go to places in Portland, you know, 23rd Street or some of the difficult places you drive around and around if you've driven there, and you don't mind because it's so wonderful.
Right.
Well, one, yeah, partly it's wonderful because there isn't a lot of parking, and partly it's so wonderful that you will spend a lot of time finding a space. Whereas here in Salem, people go, oh, I went downtown and I couldn't find a space around the block I wanted to go, so I gave up. And well, then, you know, there isn't something there that's really attracting you if you're going to give up. There's a lot of times I go to Fred Meyer and I drive around and around at a holiday, and there's no spaces there either. But Fred Meyer isn't saying, well, we need another parking lot. They just say, well, sometimes it's difficult to find a space there, and if you want to come to Fred Meyer, you will. And downtown should have that same attitude. We're going to make this so wonderful that we hope we have a parking problem, and we hope people are, you know, having to circle the block, because that's what a vibrant downtown is. It's filled with people. And so for people my age, as my wife and I think, do we want to live in the country the whole time, which we are pretty sure we don't. At some time it'll be too much for us. It's really that sense of, like you were saying, of community, where you're out and you're seeing people. They're not just in cars whizzing by, they're on bikes, they're on skateboards. There's this liveliness in this, which great cities have. And Salem could have that, but it takes some vision on the part of our city council, mayor, and city manager to have that.
And we have we have a lot of homes where they have a porch, and it's close to the sidewalk. So if people are walking by, you can actually talk to them, have a conversation. You get to recognize people after a while.
Right.
And that also helps build community, because now you know who your neighbors are. A lot of times in these suburban developments, you have this kind of moat-like effect where the garage door goes up and they go in and you don't see them again.
Right.
And unless you have kids and the kids start playing together. But I mean, that was my experience living in the suburbs, and most of the time my parents lived in the suburbs. And I did not find that a great place to, you know, be growing up. But I think Salem does have a lot of potential, and we should be tapping into that as opposed to just trying to make it look like everything else in suburban California, say.
Right. Well, to give a plug, we're interested in this new place that people haven't heard about, Fairview Edition, out on the old Fairview Training Center property in South Salem, where Eric Olson, who has done this in Monmouth, Edwards Edition, a front porch community, where a kind of a new urbanism thing, where there's alleyways in back where the cars park in back, and there's front porches on the front, obviously, and the streets are fairly, narrow. And that's what he's trying, really, it's the first place of its kind pretty much in Salem. And it's funny that there haven't been more of these. When I saw his Monmouth development, I urged him to come to Salem, and eventually he was able to buy 50 acres from Sustainable Fairview Associates. So we need more of this, because then downtown, like you say, already has this, and Portland worries about gentrification and making these inner urban neighborhoods too expensive. And Salem's problem is that it hasn't started that process of gentrification, really. It should be attracting creative professionals and people like you that are still working. Not that you're not working, but you're not, working, that want to live close to downtown. You got the Capitol there, you got Willamette University. It's just funny that that area in inner downtown isn't taking off more than it is. And I don't know why it isn't, and what the City of Salem can do to help bring that about. The North Campus of the development of the state hospital could be redeveloped into something that would also be that. It's close to downtown. It could be a cool, new urbanism thing with shops and apartments and condos and small single-family cottage-type homes that would be close. So that would be nice. But this requires just a little more creative thinking on the part of our city leaders to bring this about.
And to think about how things are developing, not how things were.
Right.
And I think that's quite a bit of what I see. It's looking back at the past and thinking it's going to continue into the far future. And I just don't think it will, because for one thing, during the time of the suburbs, we had really cheap energy. I can remember when I was a kid, you get gas for 30 cents a gallon. Mm-hmm. And that's gone away. And I don't think those prices are ever going to come back down. They're going to just keep expanding. And so people need to think about different ways of getting around. And cars are very expensive. And I just feel that we need to start looking at the future more than the past.
Oh, absolutely. I saw the Salem Bike Boulevard Advocates today. They had a Facebook post which took off from someone by a National Bicycle magazine. It just said, tell us in 5 words why you like to bike. And this national magazine, had examples, and they'd already taken the one I thought of, which was, I feel like a kid. I said something, now I can barely think what I said. I said, my monkey mind is calmed, or something like that, because it just focuses me. Because partly, like you say, you have to pay attention, because it's kind of risky. And when you have to pay attention, you're not listening to your phone, you're not, you're watching where you are, you're paying much more attention, whereas car, you're kind of safe, and you're in a seatbelt and airbags, and in a bike, you're just out there as you are on a motorcycle or scooter. And so, this is, you don't see people who says, tell me in 5 words why you like your car, unless it's a classic car, a sports car, something with, a real, most people, it's a utilitarian thing.
How I
you
get from one place to another.
Yeah, it is. Why do you like driving in your car? Well, it's something I just have to do. I mean, I have a Mini Cooper, and I actually do kind of enjoy just the act of driving. But for most of us, once you're past 16 and you have that joy, it's just something you get in there and then you turn the radio. So this is partly it's just a quality of life that we had, more bike lanes. If we had a more walkable, bikeable downtown where people are running into each other. I mean, this is what makes life worth, living, and is seeing other people, is not just being encased in our shell, like you say, of the suburbs. You just go to work, you don't see people. Not that all suburbs are this way,
right.
But it's more, some have a sense of community, but it's more in the denser urban areas where people actually know their neighbors, as opposed to just seeing them coming in and, going in their cars.
Well, talking about bikes, for me, it makes me feel free.
Right.
That I can move around quickly, but I can still notice things. And the same thing with walking. I'll notice, every time I walk, I notice something different. Like, oh, okay, the crocuses are up.
Right.
Oh, looks like the cherries are going to bloom like in a few more days or something like that. And you notice things change from day to day.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
it's kind of comforting, I guess, for me to see that and to be so aware of all your surroundings, where you don't get that in a car.
No, you absolutely don't. I mean, I'm not encouraging people to get a motorcycle or a scooter, but I know as soon as I got my big Bergman scooter a year ago, before my wife kind of made me give it up because she thought I was going to kill myself, it just struck me how every time I would get on it and I would pull up behind, say, a big city bus with stuff coming out, it was wonderful because I'd never been behind a big city bus with the diesel coming out and smelling it and just hearing the rumble. You know, that everything is so much more alive because, like you say, you're out of that, what motorcycle people call the cage of a car. You're out in the real world. And most of these goals that Salem Community Vision has and what Salem should be doing is, you know, getting people together, bringing them together, because that's what, you know, our joy is really encountering other people, being out in nature, seeing nature in the city as much as possible, not cutting it down for parking lots like this city has been doing. So, you know, Salem would be a much better place if we could just get on the right track.
One of the things also you mentioned is about vacants downtown.
Yes.
And I think that is something that needs to be addressed by the city, that having a building sit there vacant for any length of time is not a good use of the land.
Right.
And so you have a proposal to make on that issue.
Well, Salem Community Vision did just, it's kind of a carrot and stick thing, as I'm seeing. I mean, the carrot would be to encourage, as I believe other places are, Portland, trying to simplify and encourage small businesses, an incubator approach, which I'm not a great expert on this, but somehow encouraging small businesses, you know, to kind of streamline the process for starting up businesses and moving into these vacant downtown places. A guy left a comment, Walker, by his name, that said, well, the stick would be that there should, right now they're getting tax benefits from just leaving them vacant. I mean, they're writing off stuff. They should be penalized for not renting and leasing these downtown businesses, and there should be a progressive, you know, it's empty for 6 months, there's a certain penalty for this for a year, for 2 years, and so they would encourage people, you know, to get those places rented, because you see places downtown that have just been sitting there for years and years, and you think, what's going on? I mean,
yeah, and it'd be nice if they applied that to the banks that have repossessed homes too.
Right.
Because that's one of the things I don't like seeing in the neighborhood is vacant homes, you know, that have been vacant for a year or longer.
Right.
And so if the banks had to fix them up and get people in them, I mean, to me, that is something that we should be aiming at, especially when we have a large population of homeless. Why do we have vacant buildings and
Right.
vacant homes?
Right.
So, Brian, I want to really thank you for coming in and talking about this, because I really, and maybe we can elaborate more on this at some other show, talking about some of these issues, because I think these are important ones to bring out to the public and keep this in front of them, because it just can't be a one-time only kind of situation where we talk about it one time and then we go on to something else.
No, that's right.
So, Brian, thank you for coming in. This was Brian Hines, and it's been the Valley View, and come back next week.